Welcome, fellow Stardust. Are you ready for a scare? I see you've come back for more. If you're new here, buckle up. And thank you all for joining me today. My name is DeRay, aka Rainbow Fright, lover of all things dark, creepy, and weird. And today, I'll be talking about 1958's and 1988's The Blob, with a very special returning guest. He was a panel member on our very first Monster Fan Live livestream. Please join me in welcoming back Albert of Blood Brews.
How's it going, DeRay?
Very, very well. How's it going for you?
Pretty good. Thank you for inviting me on.
Yes. Thank you so much for being here again. I am actually such a huge fan of your channel, and the last time that we had a discussion similar to this one was when we were chatting over on your channel about the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre. But today, we are going to talk about a villain that is way more ruthless. So before we get into our initial thoughts about the original, here is a short synopsis, and beware that there will be spoilers. A meteor from outer space lands near a small town in Pennsylvania containing a carnivorous alien blob that envelops its victims, becoming bigger, redder, and more beastly. Steve and Jane, who are witnesses to the blob's destruction, are ignored when they try to warn the police and townspeople. So Albert, with this being your first time watch, what were your initial thoughts on the original?
Well, whenever you go into a film that's like this old and from this era, I feel like you have to view it through a different lens. You can't view it like you would view a movie from today, 2024, right? It's gonna have to be through a whole nother lens. Obviously, they're not gonna show the same amount of things that they would nowadays. I felt like it was a really good film. It kept me interested. I really liked the way that they would use the dark to kind of make you feel that the creature could come from any angle of the screen, because there are some times when it felt like these shots are really, really dark. And it just made me wonder why. Like, we can't even make out really what's happening. But then it made me think, okay, well, that's purposeful so that you're kind of like on edge, like, okay, well, is the creature in the room or not?
I feel like that was partly due to budgetary limitations, because while this was a fun movie, seeing this creature go around, it wasn't necessarily scary for me, but I could see how watching it in the 50s, seeing this nasty, slimy thing could make you feel certain things and think certain things. And I actually liked this commentary that we get with the police. They're not necessarily doing their job and they're abusing their power. And with that, I just appreciated that we had the kids who rallied together to save the townspeople in the end. It was geared toward teens, but it was a fun story to see go down alongside this amoeba-like thing eating folks.
I just thought it was crazy how everybody got along so well in this film. I mean, even when the three high school guys came and they like ganged up on his car with him trying to get with this girl, right? They're picking on him and he's super like okay with it. And then even to the point where they become friends later and they go on this adventure to save the town. And I'm just like, wait a second. They started out trying to punk him with his woman. Like, what is going on right now? So that kind of threw me off a little bit. But after doing research, after watching the film, I realized that it was produced by a good news production and that the director, Irvin Yeaworth, was a Methodist minister. So I could see why it had those religious ties that made it like, it almost felt like, you know, it was a little bit too good.
What do you want us to do, Steve? All right. We're gonna find this thing, and we're gonna make people believe us.
And when people are dying on screen, they just kind of fall off out of frame a little bit, except for the doctor. We get a little bit of a glimpse of his death, but we don't really see anything too gruesome, but it's still one of the greatest, horror films for a lot of folks. To touch on a couple of negatives, there was just a whole lot of talking in this movie compared to the action, and it made the movie feel a little bit longer than it actually was.
It is crazy to me because the remake was actually, about 10 minutes, 15 minutes longer. And it didn't feel as long at all. So
Exactly.
it is kind of a trip.
I mentioned the tight budget before, and you can really tell that there was a tight budget when it comes to the acting. We have Steve McQueen here, who went on to be an international icon, but this really just isn't his best work because he's just so stiff, and I really hate him when he's biting his fist at the phone booth. It's just so over the top for me. It was a well-made film for the time, and it really did capture the golden era of teen drive-in B movies.
Listen to me. Now listen to me, everybody. This town is in danger. Now, several people have been killed already.
Steve McQueen, this is his first leading role, one of his very first films, but he was apparently very difficult to work with on this set. He wasn't really the first choice for the director, but he wiggled his way onto the set. But you have evidence of him being difficult in the film when you see his cigarette smoke coming up from his left shoulder because he refused to put his cigarette out between takes. And I just thought that is just so unprofessional. On your first, second or third film, that just shows how cocky he was at the very beginning.
Crazy to find out after the fact, right? He didn't even like discussing the film because of how much he disliked it after it was made. So that was a trip for me. But also, he just really overshadowed everyone else in the film. And I mean, it felt like nobody else was really all that memorable besides him.
I can totally feel that. Everybody else kind of blends in. They were all terrible. He stands out because he's the star. But only other person who I could give praise to for their acting is Jane, Anita Corsat. She was great. I liked what she brought to the table. She just had very kind and intentional eyes, and she was obviously in Andy Griffith, which was in the background of my childhood, and I just always liked seeing her. So seeing her in The Blob, was cool, and I just liked how strong she was. She backs up Steve whenever he's being ganged up on or pushed into a corner, and when she speaks her mind, she's speaking it with strength and just intention. She just feels like a force behind him, which is great. So yeah, I love Jane's character. She was a strong feminist character, if I can say, for the 50s.
Yeah, for the 50s, I could see that. It was weird because I almost took it as she was the opposite of that. It almost felt like she was slightly playing the helpless woman role, and she almost needed Steve McQueen's character to kind of help guide her through this scenario, right? And so it was cool watching the flip on the 88 movie when she becomes a complete independent badass.
But I think because she chose to go out again with Steve to go find this thing and tell people about it, that showed a bit of bravery on her end. When they're in the freezer, they kind of think that that's their end right there, and Steve comforts her and saying, "Oh, I'm gonna take care of you, it's fine." And you can kind of tell that she's like, okay, he's comforting me, but he really can't know, but I'm just gonna take comfort in those words and in being here with him. And if this is our end, this is our end. So that kind of happened again in the diner, and she has her little brother with her, and she basically does the same thing to her little brother, but he actually believes it. She and Steve make eye contact and basically are like, yeah, this is probably the end, and he's probably thinking, oh wow, she's so brave and awesome. So yeah, that's why I had those feelings about her. But you're right, we'll get more into it here once we get to the remake, but there is a huge transformation with the Jane character in the remake. The original film is an independent science fiction horror, but it's a PG film essentially. I don't even know what the rating is. I tried to find the MPAA rating. It might even be G. I don't know, but it is super, super vanilla. And the producer is Jack Harris, and this was his first movie that he had produced. And he was inspired by Star Jelly, or you could call it Astral Jelly, whatever the hell it is. But it's been in the history books since, the 14th century. So we have these cops who are portrayed as cynical and not doing their jobs well, and they're sometimes not even doing their jobs, as we see one of the police officers playing chess while he's at the station. We have the cops and the adults who are basically looking at the kids as no good and untrustworthy. But again, they are the ones to rally around and save the town. When you, Albert, read about this Star Jelly shit that Jack Harris, the producer, was inspired by, what did you think?
I was surprised, but also it makes sense, right? Because whenever I've seen that stuff on the ocean or whatever looks like that jelly stuff that you see when you go to the ocean, you're walking around, I'm like, okay, yeah, that's kind of it's cool. It's like this weird, like jelly gelatinous stuff. It's creepy looking. It made me think of the Blob, even though this was like their initial thought to create this whole creature based off of this thing that they've just seen. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, and it's crazy that when you look up Star Jelly or Astral Jelly, there's not like one definition of what it is. There's just all these different accounts of what people have seen. Got people thinking that it's the insides of a certain animal just kind of rotting away, or that it's a certain plant that's kind of decomposing in a certain way. People actually still thinking that it's coming from the sky. Yeah, when I was reading about Star Jelly, anything that looks gooey and nasty and gelatinous, you're gonna call Star Jelly, I guess.
Right.
Apparently, according to this definition.
It's just cool that it like birthed this like sci-fi creature that had such an impact on the horror genre, right? I mean, I think it's cool. I kind of am surprised that we haven't had even a remake after the 80s or more sequels to it. It's kind of surprising.
Yeah, that or just more movies that have this amoeba-like creature in it.
I really enjoyed the fact that it had that like space alien thing to it, and that we're now coming into contact with it and having to deal with it and not really knowing what the hell it is.
It leaves so much room for interpretation and being creative with what this thing is and with what it can do, because throughout the film, this is the first time we've seen this type of creature, and we see it kind of evolving, and we're putting the pieces together as to why. And it's just cool seeing it morph into a bigger and more red and more scary creature, as the movie goes on.
Agreed. The more it fills with human blood.
Yes. The original film was shot in the summer of 1957 at Valley Forge Studios, as well as several small neighboring towns. The special effects artist was Bart Sloan, who would go on to do the effects for 4D Man. But those films would be the only two that Sloan would work on.
I thought that it was really cool how they made you feel like you were in a small town. And so when the people of the town like band together to save it, right? It feels like you're going to the diner. You're gonna go visit the theater to go grab the friends. You're going to the place, the makeout place, right? Where the movie starts out at. You're going to the cabin. So it kind of made me feel like I was in a small town in the 50s. Everybody's homey. I could go down to the corner and get a slice of pie. And now this creature's attacking, right? So I really liked that. And the theater scene is probably my favorite parts of the film. It just felt cool. I don't know. I love that theater scene. So
It's just really cool how it's literally just silicone and vegetable dye. It was just a ball like about this big, and they just manipulated what it was sitting on sometimes, like for instance, a table with cameras fixed onto the table and having that move around and having it just kind of slide around, making it look like it's going up or lunging out at somebody. So yeah, because it was the size it was, they also just used a lot of miniatures, which is really cool to discover. And you can see that without doing research in a lot of the shots that the scenes are miniature, or that they are using a photo of the old man's arm when he's got the blob all over him. I had to rewind it. I was like, why does it look so flat and weird? And I'm like, oh, it's a photo, and they're just moving it around on a table.
I mean, for the 50s, there's not much we're going to expect, right? It's going to be the lighting for the most part, the way that the sets look, and you can't have high expectations for what's going to be put out there compared to, of course, today. So for me, again, viewing it through that lens, I feel like they did a really good job with what they had, right? And the budget they had. So yeah, I feel like they did a really good job. I liked it.
Yes, and it's funny when we have the old man discovering the meteor, you have these, noises like cricket noises, but also alien type noises. And I recognized them, and I had to go back to a couple of my favorite movies, Slither and Creepshow, and it's very similar. So I'm like, definitely, it's clear that Creepshow and Slither were inspired by the original.
Come on. Come on. Come on.
Wait.
And it's cool to see this diner scene because I feel like it's one of the firsts that a lot of other horror films kind of emulated. Whenever you see a diner in a horror film, you think back to just a bunch of your favorite horror films. I'm sure, this was hugely influential in that, whether those filmmakers who included diners in their films know it or not.
It's like a place of comfort, right? You're supposed to be comfortable there. You're just relaxing with your family, usually eating. And then some craziness happens, like, I don't know, what was it, Pulp Fiction or something? Anyway.
Yep. So obviously the title song, which was apparently a big hit. It became number 33 in the Hot 100 Billboard charts, which is pretty awesome. And it is, a catchy song. I do feel like moving every time I see it.
Of the blob, it creeps and leaps and glides and slides across the floor, right through the door.
It's just funny that was the opening song for this movie. So the director replaced the original opening song, which was a bit more dark and spooky, but he decided he wanted it to be more campy, which he definitely achieved in putting that song in there, because while he wanted to make a scary movie, he still wasn't taking it that seriously and wanted it to still be a fun, lighthearted, again, innocent and modest movie.
Oh yeah, for sure. I love that opening music, because as soon as I heard it, I started laughing. I was like, no way. How am I supposed to take this serious right now? And then I was like, you know what? This is actually kind of has a good sound to it. Like, I actually kind of like this. But at first, when I heard the blob in there, it just took me back to when other movies have had a theme song like that. It made me think kind of 007 James Bond type of movies, where they have that specific song that leads you into the movie, right? So that's kind of how it kind of made me feel. As
far as being campy, I don't always gravitate toward campy horror right away. I'm glad I watched this now, because I think if I would have watched it earlier, I would have kind of not come back to it for a long time because of its campy nature. But it reminds me of things that I love, like Psycho Beach Party, which I'm absolutely in love with, and Death Becomes Her, or even May. But yeah, so with my new appreciation and hearing that song come on, I'm like, okay, so it's not gonna try to, give me goosebumps or anything. It's just gonna give me a good time. So, all right, I'm ready for it. Let's go.
It definitely did feel like a goofy ass movie that was supposed to not be taken seriously. But then with Steve McQueen's acting, he was just so good at being serious, and the way he would, his demeanor and everything, it just made it serious regardless of what else was going on in the background. So for that, I mean, his acting to me is really good just based off of that. And I haven't even seen a bunch of Steve McQueen movies.
Neither have I. So again, we differ on that. It's cool to hear you say you appreciated his acting, whereas I was like, all right.
Too much McQueen. Give me some more of the Blob.
Man's hand. Only it was bigger, and then it was on his old head, and then in just a second he disappeared.
He disappeared?
He was all gone.
In a small town in Pennsylvania, a meteor lands that is discovered by the Can Man. While poking around at the meteor, a blob-like creature attaches itself to him and eventually devours him. It's then that the blob terrorizes the small town, feeding on everyone in its path. Meg and Brian, who are witnesses to the creature's destruction, soon find out that the creature isn't an alien, but instead a biological warfare experiment created by the US government during the Cold War. Proud of their achievement, the government has no interest in the public's safety, so it's left up to Meg and Brian to save the town. You said you saw the remake in bits and pieces, so I'm interested to hear what your initial thoughts are after watching the entire thing.
Well, again, this was the second film I watched. I watched the original before doing research on the 1988 remake, and I was 50-50 because when you're watching a remake film, you already have those negative thoughts like, oh, here we go into a remake. But this is 30 years later. So I feel like it's time. And not only that, that lands us in the 80s, which is, in my mind, the greatest time in horror for practical effects, for creativity, for like just the way that the stories would go like so wild in certain parts. And it's just like, some things don't even make any sense, but just the strangeness of the films make them better, right? So yeah. I'm just a huge fan of 80s horror, and so that alone, it just made me excited to watch this and to talk to you about it.
Hell yes. This is definitely one of my favorite horror films of the 80s and just one of my favorite films of the 80s, period. The practical effects are crazy good. A lot of them hold up today. There are some things here and there where it didn't really transfer so great to digital media, but overall the practicals were just spot on. And the story gave us a lot of twists and turns while still staying true to the original source. A lot of the same beats were hit, the setting was the same, and the overall message was the same, but the tone and the gore levels were not.
It definitely paid homage to the original for sure.
Yes.
But also stayed within the whole 80s vibe of things that were going on at the time in the 80s in horror for sure as well. So I really liked that. Yeah,
it took things up a notch with the whole adult authority figures versus the kids. We before had the kids and the adults / cops, but now we have the kids, adults / cops, and then above them we have the government.
It made me care about the characters more though, because there was a lot more character development in this film and as compared to the other one where I felt like we were just thrown these people to like that we have to deal with now, whereas this, it almost showed that the people by themselves is kind of giving them a bit of an introduction. We're kind of learning about and caring about them, and then when they come into brushes with death or what have you, it seems like it's more of like a, oh shit, please don't kill him now, like keep him around a little longer or whatever, right? But you just give a shit more. So
Exactly.
I think with horror that is super important, because otherwise you don't. It's like what's the point? I mean, who cares if you guys? Then you're there just to see people get killed off, right?
Yep, you took the words right out of my mouth. I was just gonna say there was a lot more character development at the start of this film before we see the meteor land. So we basically have the Steve McQueen character kind of get split into two, allowing for the shock value of one of them getting killed off. Although since we're touching on it, I did read something that was interesting and makes way more sense, that instead of Steve McQueen's character being split into two, his character is actually Meg. She's the new
McQueen character, and she's the badass.
you know, doing all of what she's supposed to be doing, which is saving the town.
Shawnee Smith definitely did a really good job at playing a lead female role in this movie. I mean, she was, you know, trying to save the kids through this, what was it? The freaking sewer,
Yeah.
right? And she was trying to so she was, to me, she was awesome. She stepped up and she took charge when nobody else was. So yeah, I loved her in this film.
Yes, so loved her. She was just a badass, and I love how she wasn't objectified. She's basically covered from head to toe in sweaters and long pants the entire time. Probably because, you know, it was a little cold, but even when it's cold, they have girls in skimpy clothes. So I just love that her character was the focus and not her body. It's cool to hear her later in her career find out just how much people love the Blob. It was a flop at the box office, and so it's slowly been finding its audience, and she's just like, wow, okay, so this is what's going down. These are my people, and this is who loves this movie that I haven't really thought about, you know?
Come on! You can do better than that!
All right, so let's talk about, real quick, the old man who discovers the meteor in the first place.
It was funny. And then the chase scene that obviously leads to him getting hit by Meg and her boyfriend. It was just comedy to me, and it was just more added to the camp of it, right? Because it's the same guy that watched Brian crash on his motorcycle when he's trying to do the jump.
Yeah.
So to me, it's just okay, obviously we're introducing this guy for a reason.
Well, with your two severed hands, I was looking for a comment on him chopping or attempting to chop his hand off, because him attempting to chop his hand off is exactly what we wanted the first guy to do in the first movie.
I don't think I would have gotten in the car with him. That's all I'm saying. Everybody jumps in the car with this dude that has this glove shit on his hand. I don't want to be anywhere near that. I don't know what the hell's going on.
Especially if you saw it move, you know?
I want it to be okay, but I'm also not going to get that close not knowing what the hell that is. But that just leads into one of the best scenes, too, where they take him to the hospital, and then you just see his body get taken over by this creature, right? And he's just, his throat starts bulging out and stuff, and then he's eating away at the waist down.
But I wonder, why, and this is just me being nitpicky, and it was a reason for them to, show something gory, I guess, before Paul's death, but why didn't the Blob eat the entire corpse? That doesn't make sense. It would have eaten the entire thing, right?
That was odd to me as well.
It leads into Paul's death, where, you know, the Blob is still fairly clear, because the Blob hasn't eaten too many humans yet, so it's not as red and bloody. Watching Meg pull his arm is definitely just one of my top 3 moments, if not the best moment in the movie.
Agreed. That is one of the coolest scenes. But just seeing it the Blob being pulled back over his face, and it just you can see him through it. It was just oh my god, it's such, and isn't that the cover of the film as well? So, but that's such just it just gets imprinted in your mind.
Because we know, seeing him through the Blob, you see his pain. He's still alive, so you know he's feeling everything. That's the worst part of it. And so yes, this cast also included a long list of a bunch of different character actors, which was really cool to see. I would have to say some of my favorites that were in there are Bo Billingsley and Bill Moseley, of course, and then just a whole bunch of people. Art LaFleur is another one that fun to always see in everything that he did.
I really liked seeing the the bad guy end up being the hero. So he ended up being that anti-hero character in the film, and Kevin Dillon's acting was great. I feel like he just did a really good job in this film as being the lead for me.
His character helped to really emphasize the power struggle between the kids and the authority figures. He's the epitome of bad, even though he has a good heart. Just because he's wearing a leather jacket and he's smoking cigarettes before 18, and he likes motorcycles doesn't make him a bad guy, but everybody sees him and treats him as that, so he just kind of acts out as that.
But you're just like everybody else in this town. You're full of shit, Flag.
Hey, wait a second. Hey, calm down, all right? I'm sorry, okay? Come on, sit down.
To get permission to do the remake, Chuck Russell actually went to Jack Harris's house in Beverly Hills to ask him for permission to do this, and Jack Harris liked the treatment and gave him the green light. Chuck Russell and Frank Darabont ended up writing the script. Chuck and Frank actually met in 1981 on the set of Hell Night. Chuck was producing the film and Darabont was a PA on set. After Chuck read Darabont's spec script for MASH, he asked him to partner up with him on the script for The Blob. So once they started working on the script, they started to shop around for studios, and once they made it to New Line Cinema and spoke with Bob Shaye, they were both hired to write the script for Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Dream Warriors. And Chuck ended up directing that movie, so it ended up being his first feature film, and then The Blob would end up being his second feature film. After doing Dream Warriors, Frank Darabont and Chuck Russell, were hoping that New Line Cinema would help produce the film, but they still weren't interested, and so we ended up having Andrew Blay and Elliot Kastner produce, with TriStar distributing the movie. But afterwards, Chuck Russell would end up going back to New Line Cinema, and he wrote and directed The Mask, which had a lot of CGI compared to the lack of CGI in the remake of The Blob. And he also went on to go ahead and do Eraser and The Scorpion King. And then Darabont would go on to write as well as direct Shawshank Redemption, The Green Mile, and The Mist.
So the special effects were from Tony Gardner, and I think he did a really good job at this. And then come to find out, one of the first things he did or worked on was Michael Jackson's Thriller, helping out Rick Baker, which to me, I was raised on Michael Jackson's Thriller. I remember being in my whatever crib or whatnot and watching this while my mom got ready for work. And that movie forever changed me. Being able to watch him then do this, I think it was really cool.
The Blob is a bunch of silk quilts that have pockets in them, and they would fill it with this mixture basically of water and Methicil, which is used to thicken milkshakes at fast food restaurants. Pockets in these quilts were filled with this stuff, and they would layer it on top of a person or whatever robotic thing they were using and move it around, and when it would leak the stuff, they would replace it with another quilt that was full of all the liquid. I would just have so much fun if I was on that set working with that blob.
And I don't know about you, but did it remind you of The Thing at all? It kind of gave me the way that The Thing looked. It kind of had that creepy, especially when it was on the ceiling in the theater.
Oh, for sure.
Right?
Yes.
And it was just and then the yo-yo's still going.
Yep,
exactly. That's ridiculous, but I love it.
I was like, yeah, that would have never happened. But hey,
No.
it was effective and whatever. You
It
brought
made
some
me
shit
laugh.
together and it worked.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, I mentioned the silk blankets and whatever else, but apparently, like, just so many different things were used to create this creature. So the cinematographer had, a lot of times a hard time matching what it looked like from scene to scene, because it was evolving. So it had to look like the same material and the same creature who's just evolving a little bit. But it's funny because in the remake, they also still utilize miniatures like they did in the original. And the reason why they didn't want to do full scale things was just because it was too heavy, which makes a lot of sense. So it's cool to see that they still did tricks that were used in the first movie.
I also liked how it kind of like generated these tentacles types of things out of its like main source of blobbage, and then it would like grab people and pull them in, like that little kid when it grabbed that little kid in the sewer and
Oh, yes.
disintegrated
So
his body. Great. Kids are not safe in this film. Children
No, and I
are
love
not
it.
safe.
They are not.
Get us the boat, go! Come on, let's go!
I thought it was cool how the 88 version kind of took jabs at the slashers of the time, right? Even has the mom of the kids that are talking about going to the theater to see this movie, calling slashers trash. And it just reminds me of that Peter Vincent scene from Fright Night. When he talks about nobody wants to see vampires anymore. All they want are demented madmen running around in ski masks, hacking up virgins. But that to me, it's just like that vibe of like creature features against slasher films. And I was raised on creature features, right? So I actually feel that, like, yeah, I'm more for the creature features. Get out of the way, slasher films.
Yeah, okay, I see that. I can tell.
I could probably guess that looking at your content for sure.
That's why I wasn't too surprised, because I know I gave you 3 choices and you're immediately like, yeah, we're doing the Blob.
I was like, all right.
I was like, yeah, that's a creature feature that I haven't like even really thought of. I mean, I've seen it, like just the picture, and thought, oh, that'd be kind of cool to like revisit or watch that. But yeah, so it was good homework for me, for sure, being like someone that's into horror as much as I am. I honestly think that it wasn't pushed hard enough by the right people, and the fact that it wasn't a slasher film, which was super popular during the 80s, right? Especially the late 80s, the slasher films were kind of taken over. And so I think a creature feature just wasn't something that people thought was going to sell. So they didn't help promote it, probably didn't get pushed out as much, and it kind of just fell to the wayside.
Exactly that. TriStar was changing management, and they didn't want to put money and effort into a film that they basically didn't have any part of. So yeah, there wasn't really great marketing. It was shown in way less theaters than the other movies at the time were, which is really just unfortunate. And it was going up against some other great movies like Big, A Fish Called Wanda, Roger Rabbit, Die Hard, Coming to America, and Midnight Run, just wildly different movies. But yeah, TriStar made a huge mistake in not promoting this movie. It cost $10 million to make. It only made 8.2 at the box office, but since it has really found its audience, and had it had the right kind of marketing, it could have easily, I think, have made $100 million, to be quite honest with you. All right, so which one would you say you like more, the original or the remake?
So this is kind of tough for me because I really enjoyed the original, and it's the one that the remake is based off of course. But when you split the two up and you start to break it down, I don't think that I'd spend a lot more time rewatching the original film from 1958, as where the remake, I could see myself rewatching that based on just the practical effects and the whole 80s vibe alone. It makes me want to watch it. It makes me want to have it in my physical media collection, you know? So
Oh yeah.
it nudges the original out just a little bit for me.
Just a little bit. Very nice. Okay, very good. Well, I'm gonna definitely go hard on the remake for sure. I did enjoy the original. It was fun. I'm glad I finally watched it. It was a good time. I enjoyed it. But as far as my favorite between the two, I would definitely just have to go with the remake because it took things to a whole new level. It had amazing effects and it just is memorable. And I know that it's gonna hold up for another 30 years.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Well, thank you so much for being with me today, Albert. I've had such a good time chatting with you about the remake and the original, The Blob.
Thank you for the invitation. I appreciate it. Again, having to revisit or watch creature features from back in the day, and I loved it. So whenever I can do homework that helps broaden my horizons on the genre that I like really love, hey, I'm down for it. So thank you.
Hell yeah, hell yeah. Well then, until next time, Stardust. Peace.